Judge laughs at black woman in court, then freezes when she flashes her USSS badge. The courtroom doors burst open, jolting even the most composed spectators. Two bailiffs marched in, gripping a woman by the arms as if she were dangerous. Her navy blue suit, once pristine, was now wrinkled and stained. That woman was Maya Jennings. Her wrists, raw from tight handcuffs, bore silent testimony to her mistreatment. The room fell into an eerie silence. Eyes followed her, not with curiosity, but with judgment. No one saw a professional. No one cared who she really was. In their minds, she was already guilty, because she was a black woman on trial. The moment Maya was shoved into the defendant's chair, Judge Ronald Mercer peered down from his bench with disdain etched into every wrinkle of his aging face. A man well into his 70s, Mercer was a relic of an older, darker system, one who wore his robe not to dispense justice, but to exert control. His silver hair was neatly combed, his black robe immaculate, but his voice dripped with venom. He didn't hide his contempt. In fact, he relished it. "Well," he said, his voice slow and patronizing, his lips curled into a bitter smirk. "Look what we have here. Another one who thinks the rules don't apply to her." The words echoed through the courtroom like a slap. A few spectators even chuckled, low and cruel. The prosecutor looked down at his notes, saying nothing, pretending not to hear. Maya said nothing, her jaw clenched, her eyes fixed forward. Her silence was not submission, it was strategy, but Judge Mercer mistook it for weakness. "I assume you'll be giving us the usual speech," he continued, mocking her with every syllable. "How you were wrongfully arrested, profiled, mistreated, how society is so unfair to people like you." That phrase, "people like you," hung in the air like smoke after a gunshot. Maya didn't flinch, but inside every word ignited a fire that had been smoldering for years. Mercer leaned forward, eyes narrowing. "You see, Miss Jennings, the court is tired of entitled individuals walking in here thinking they're above the law. You're not special, you're not different, and frankly, I've seen your type too many times to care." The venom in his voice struck like a dagger. He wasn't judging her based on evidence or law. He had already decided who she was based on the color of her skin and the firmness of her gaze. To him, confidence in a black woman was arrogance. Silence was guilt. Dignity was defiance. He hated it all. The bailiff stood close by, arms folded, ready to subdue her at the slightest motion. The jurors sat stiffly, eyes darting between each other, unsure whether to pity her or condemn her. The prosecutor still hadn't said a word, his silence a cowardly endorsement of the judge's prejudice. The room was thick with the stink of injustice. The walls, the benches, the polished floor, all of it seemed to close in on Maya like a trap. And yet, she didn't bend. She sat tall, her breathing steady, her fingers calmly rested on the edge of the defense table. But her eyes, God, her eyes, were locked on Mercer with the icy stillness of someone who had seen men like him rise and fall before. She was not here to beg. She was not here to plead for mercy. She was here for something far more dangerous. Truth. The gavel cracked sharply against the polished wood, shattering the heavy silence that had engulfed the courtroom. Judge Ronald Mercer leaned forward, glaring downward from his elevated seat with a thin, predatory smile. His fingers drummed impatiently on the polished surface of his bench as his gaze narrowed onto Maya Jennings, making no effort to hide his contempt. His voice, when he finally spoke, was dry and emotionless, like paper catching fire slowly at its edges. "Prosecutor Graves," he drawled slowly, clearly enjoying each syllable. "Let's hear the charges. Remind us exactly why Ms. Jennings is sitting here, wasting our time." Todd Graves rose from his chair, buttoning his expensive suit jacket with a smooth, practiced movement. He was younger than the judge, sharply dressed and cold-eyed, the kind of man whose every action was calculated. Graves positioned himself strategically, facing the jury directly, ignoring Maya completely, as if she had ceased to exist the moment she was seated. His voice was calm but ruthless, devoid of any empathy or hesitation. "Your Honor, members of the jury," Graves began, his tone icy, clinical, his eyes firmly avoiding Maya's unwavering gaze. "The defendant, Maya Jennings, stands accused of illegally entering a secure federal facility deliberately refusing direct orders to leave, and intentionally withholding identification when challenged by federal officers. He paused, allowing his carefully chosen words to linger heavily in the courtroom, making sure their implications settled in each juror's mind. Graves understood the power of silence. He wielded it like a weapon. He allowed the jury just enough time to form the image he'd painted. Maya Jennings as a defiant intruder, a trespasser, a threat. Not once did he acknowledge her calm composure, her dignified presence, or the raw bruises that still circled her wrists. He saw her merely as a case number, a problem to solve quickly and ruthlessly. According to testimony from several federal officers, Graves continued, now pacing slightly, his polished shoes clicking softly against the courtroom floor. The defendant gained access to the facility under false pretenses, ignored repeated commands to produce valid identification, and became combative when officers attempted to remove her from the premises. A murmur rippled through the audience. Maya felt every word hit her like physical blows. Yet outwardly she remained stoic, composed. Each accusation twisted the truth, but no one asked why. Nobody in that courtroom seemed interested in the facts. Not the judge, not the prosecutor, and certainly not the people who watched her with eyes filled with suspicion and prejudice. To them, her very presence was proof enough of guilt. Mercer watched Graves approvingly, nodding subtly at each accusation. The judge had clearly made up his mind already. He didn't even pretend to consider any possibility of innocence. His eyes were full of a quiet, simmering disdain, as if Maya's mere existence offended him. Graves turned briefly, finally acknowledging Maya's presence for the first time, his face a mask of cold efficiency. His voice hardened further. When given multiple opportunities to clarify her reasons for entering the restricted area, Ms. Jennings refused cooperation, displaying a troubling lack of respect for authority. Another pause. Graves let the weight of his words hang menacingly. Maya's jaw tightened imperceptibly. She understood what he was doing. He was painting her as arrogant, defiant, a woman who believed she was above the rules. But nobody in that courtroom had asked her why she was there. Not once had they given her a chance to speak, to explain, to clarify. They'd chosen their version of the truth, and now they expected her to accept it without protest. Graves lifted a file from his table, holding it high enough for the jury to see, deliberately dramatizing his next point. Here we have the sworn statements of the officers involved. They all agree that Maya Jennings demonstrated clear aggression, resistance, and a persistent refusal to identify herself. These officers followed standard procedure precisely, yet Ms. Jennings continues to deny wrongdoing. His words carried lethal precision. Each syllable was crafted to condemn her further, portraying Maya not only as guilty but also as defiant and disrespectful, someone dangerous enough to justify the bruises on her wrists, the harsh treatment, and the public humiliation. Graves lowered the file dramatically, his face expressionless, his eyes cold and distant. Judge Mercer's voice sliced through the tension abruptly. "Thank you, Mr. Graves. Your presentation is clear. It seems we have a defendant who believes rules and procedures simply do not apply to her. Perhaps she thinks being defiant grants her special privileges." His words dripped venomously, each one carefully aimed to dismantle Maya's dignity, piece by piece. He leaned closer, his voice a cruel whisper now, loud enough for everyone to hear, yet intimate enough to feel like a personal attack. "Let me be clear, Ms. Jennings. This court will not tolerate your arrogance or your refusal to acknowledge authority. People like you do not get special treatment. People like you must face consequences." That phrase, "people like you," hung heavily, the judge's unspoken message louder than any accusation Graves had leveled. Mercer's expression was triumphant, satisfied, certain he had put her firmly in her place. The entire courtroom seemed to close in on Maya, every eye watching her, every face silently judging her, every voice quietly condemning her without even hearing a single word in her defense. It felt suffocating, as though all the oxygen had suddenly vanished. Yet Maya did not break, did not cry out, did not bow her head. Her face remained steady, dignified, powerful in its silence. But inside, beneath the carefully controlled surface, Maya burned with righteous fury. She knew the truth. and she knew they would too. But right now, no one wanted to hear it. They didn't care that she had every right to be at that facility. They didn't care that her identification had been ignored deliberately, not withheld. They didn't care about justice. The truth was irrelevant to these men who wielded power without conscience. Mercer and Graves had already decided she was guilty. They didn't need facts or explanations. They wanted submission, obedience, and silence. Maya Jennings slowly rose from her seat, the scraping of the wooden chair against the polished courtroom floor echoing sharply through the tense silence. Every pair of eyes followed her movements carefully, waiting, some hopeful, many judgmental, but all of them watching intently. She straightened her posture deliberately, adjusting the sleeve of her navy blue suit jacket, though her wrists still burned and ached from the bruises left by the cuffs. She lifted her chin, her gaze calm yet piercing, her dark eyes locking firmly onto Judge Mercer's indifferent face. She allowed a single, calculated breath to pass before opening her mouth to speak. Her voice cut clearly through the oppressive air, quiet but unmistakably powerful, dripping with restrained precision. "Your Honor," she began, the title spoken without reverence, but as a subtle challenge. "I stand before this court accused of crimes I did not commit, accused by individuals who deliberately chose suspicion over truth. These charges against me are not about justice, or security, or law." She paused just enough for her words to resonate, to force every juror, every spectator, every person in that courtroom to grapple with their implication. Her voice tightened with controlled intensity. "No, these charges are about something far more sinister, hidden beneath the veneer of legality. They're about prejudice, discrimination, racism dressed in procedural formality." Her words were spoken with such sharp clarity that a ripple of unease passed through the room. The spectators shifted uncomfortably in their seats, eyes darting nervously toward the judge, who was leaning forward, his face flushed with amusement. Mercer let out a sudden laugh, booming and mocking, an abrupt sound that broke the fragile tension Maya had carefully woven. "Oh, racism now, is it?" Mercer sneered sarcastically, eyes glittering cruelly. His voice filled with arrogant mockery, amplifying his disdain. "That's your defense? You stand here accused of breaching federal security protocols, of blatantly defying direct lawful orders, and your response is to blame it on racism?" Mercer laughed again, louder this time, looking around theatrically to draw the gallery into his derision. A few spectators hesitantly joined in, encouraged by his reaction. The laughter stabbed sharply at Maya, an insult intended to diminish her credibility, to mock her struggle, to silence her truth. Mercer's voice lowered, becoming more intimate and viciously patronizing. He leaned forward even further, eyes narrowing to icy slits as he fixed Maya with a belittling stare. "Let me guess," he drawled with biting sarcasm. "You're going to tell this court that you're some kind of undercover spy, right? Perhaps a secret agent." His smile widened mockingly, displaying his teeth in a wolfish grin. "Maybe even a superhero?" Another round of cold laughter erupted across the courtroom, cruel and callous, washing over Maya like an icy wave. The prosecutor, Todd Graves, barely hid his smirk behind a hand, clearly amused by Mercer's ridicule. Even the jurors shifted, some avoiding her eyes, others openly chuckling. Yet Maya Jennings did not tremble. She did not flinch, did not break her steely composure under the humiliation Mercer had just heaped upon her. Instead, she stood firm, unwavering, unbroken, allowing the laughter to fade until silence returned, heavy and uncomfortable, as if the entire courtroom sensed that a dangerous line had just been crossed. When the room settled again, Maya's lips slowly curled into an enigmatic, icy smile. Her eyes sparkled coldly, dark and fearless, a gaze so intense it seemed to challenge Mercer's authority itself. The judge, momentarily unnerved, straightened in his chair, but stubbornly held his contemptuous sneer. He was irritated now, irritated by her dignity, by her refusal to crumble beneath his ridicule. Maya's voice, when she spoke again, became dangerously quiet, a velvet-covered blade ready to strike. "Interesting," she murmured softly, her words reaching every ear despite their quietness. "That a judge in a position of such great power should find racism entertaining. Interesting that when confronted with injustice, the reaction of this court is laughter, mockery, not concern, not investigation, not fairness. Interesting, Your Honor, that you've already condemned me before I had the chance to utter a single sentence of explanation. Her tone hardened abruptly, each syllable striking like a hammer against iron. Do you know why I refused to present my identification? It wasn't arrogance nor defiance. It was the simple fact that your officers refused to let me speak. They never asked, they demanded, they judged, they condemned. Because people who look like me don't get asked politely, do they? We get commands, we get suspicion, we get cuffs, bruises, humiliation, and then we get laughter from men like you. Mercer's face twisted slightly, no longer smiling, sensing the room's shifting mood. Yet he refused to retreat. His pride hardened into stubbornness. Miss Jennings, he growled impatiently, I will warn you just once. Baseless accusations and melodramatic speeches do not change the fact that you broke the law. Baseless? Maya repeated coldly, eyes flashing dangerously. You call my words baseless, but you've made your judgment clear already. You stand ready to condemn without even asking a single question? Tell me, Your Honor, what exactly are you afraid to hear? Mercer's eyes widened briefly in irritation. Careful, he warned harshly. I won't tolerate threats in my courtroom. Neither will I, Maya responded instantly, her words slicing through the air, perfectly measured and chillingly calm. Threats disguised as law, prejudice hidden behind a badge, injustice camouflaged beneath authority. None of these will silence me. You laugh because you believe someone like me could never be in the right. You laugh because a woman like me doesn't deserve to be heard. That laughter reveals more truth than any document or badge ever could. The entire courtroom had gone deathly quiet, hanging on her every word, tension crackling like electricity in the air. Mercer's arrogance had been shaken, though his pride forbade him to show it openly. You mockingly asked if I was a secret agent, Maya continued, her voice now low and deliberate. But it wouldn't matter if I were the president herself. You wouldn't see me differently, would you? You wouldn't respect me, because respect, to men like you, isn't earned. It's granted based solely on appearances. To you, I'm just another black woman who dares to stand tall. Mercer leaned forward abruptly, eyes glittering dangerously. I've heard enough. Spare us your dramatics. Maya's eyes blazed fiercely, her voice quiet yet burning with conviction. You've heard nothing yet. You may wear a robe, wield a gavel, and command this courtroom, but justice is not yours to mock or manipulate. Justice is a truth you cannot erase with laughter. Mercer's jaw clenched tightly. Maya allowed herself a final unflinching gaze into the judge's cold, bitter eyes, unafraid and unbroken. You laugh because you're confident no one here will challenge you, she said finally, her voice filled with quiet certainty. But you've underestimated one important thing. Truth doesn't remain silent forever, and today it will speak louder than your arrogance, louder than your prejudice. Her words reverberated powerfully, echoing long after she fell silent. Mercer glared at her, furious yet suddenly uncertain. The smirk wiped from his face. Maya Jennings had turned his ridicule into something stronger, a warning. She stood there calmly, untouched by his cruelty, her dignity untarnished, waiting patiently for justice. She knew the truth was on her side, and it would soon make itself known. Until then, she would stand firm, no matter how loudly they laughed. With a deliberate calmness that held everyone's attention hostage, Maya slowly reached inside her blazer pocket, moving cautiously yet purposefully. The bailiffs at each corner of the courtroom instinctively stiffened, hands inching toward their holsters as the tension in the air thickened instantly. The spectators leaned forward, eyes narrowed in curiosity and apprehension, unable to look away. Even Judge Mercer paused, a flicker of unease briefly disrupting his confident facade. Maya withdrew her hand, revealing a small, polished black leather wallet, slim and discreet, yet somehow formidable in her steady grasp. She let the courtroom's collective breath catch for just an instant before flipping the wallet open with calculated precision, holding it high and unmistakably clear for every eye to see. A collective gasp ripped through the gallery. The prosecutor's eyes widened in shock, the smirk melting rapidly from his lips. Judge Mercer's face paled visibly, his previously arrogant posture deflating like a punctured balloon. Clearly etched in gold on the shining badge inside the wallet were the unmistakable words, United States Secret Service, USSS. The badge glinted fiercely under the sterile fluorescent courtroom lights, casting a sharp reflection across the stunned faces of jurors and spectators alike. No one dared move. No one even dared breathe. In a single decisive moment, the tables had turned so drastically that it felt as though the ground itself had shifted. Maya's voice, when she finally spoke again, shattered the oppressive silence like glass striking marble. "My name is Special Agent Maya Jennings," she declared, her tone firm and commanding, resonating powerfully through every corner of the courtroom. Each word was measured and intentional, carrying unmistakable authority and an undeniable weight of truth. "I am a federal agent assigned to the United States Secret Service, and you," she paused, her gaze cutting directly toward Judge Mercer and Prosecutor Graves with piercing intensity, "have arrested the wrong person." The room froze completely. Even the courtroom clock seemed to halt its ticking, as though afraid to disrupt this seismic revelation. Mercer, previously arrogant and self-assured, appeared suddenly small and vulnerable, gripping his gavel tightly in white-knuckled disbelief. Graves fumbled with his documents, now useless in the face of the overwhelming truth that had just been unleashed. Before they could respond, before they could even comprehend the magnitude of their error, Maya calmly reached into a second, larger envelope tucked carefully under the documents on her table. Slowly, deliberately, she withdrew a thick sealed packet of official paperwork emblazoned with the bold seal of the Department of Justice. "This," she continued relentlessly, holding the envelope aloft for maximum impact, "is an official complaint filed directly by the United States Department of Justice, detailing multiple egregious violations committed by the officers who wrongfully arrested me. Violations that were intentionally overlooked by this very court." She paused again, allowing the weight of her statement to hang in the air, heavier than steel chains. Mercer opened his mouth slightly, clearly attempting to formulate a response, but no sound came out. He sat paralyzed, frozen by a mix of humiliation, confusion, and escalating panic. Maya took a step forward, her voice rising slightly as it filled the courtroom with steely determination. "This document outlines the explicit racial profiling, illegal detention, refusal of due process, and intentional mishandling of evidence by federal officers. Officers sworn to uphold the law, officers trusted to protect civil rights, yet who deliberately chose to violate mine simply because of my appearance." Her words cut with surgical precision. Each syllable landed powerfully, stripping bare the injustices she had endured. The jury members exchanged glances, suddenly ashamed and deeply unsettled. Many looked away in embarrassment, realizing how quickly they had judged, how readily they had accepted the distorted narrative presented against her. But Maya wasn't finished. She stepped closer still, her gaze locked onto Judge Mercer with cold fury, forcing him to meet her eyes. "Your Honor, you laughed at me when I told you that racism had played a role here. You mocked the idea that someone like me could possibly hold any position of power, any credibility. Yet here I stand, a sworn federal agent, disrespected, detained, and publicly humiliated without a shred of valid evidence." She carefully placed the sealed DOJ file onto the table in front of her, tapping it gently yet meaningfully. "This document isn't merely a complaint, Your Honor. It is a formal indictment of the prejudice, incompetence, and systemic abuse that this courtroom allowed and encouraged. It holds you and everyone involved accountable, not only to me but to the fundamental principles of justice you swore an oath to protect." Her words echoed fiercely, ricocheting like bullets off the walls, penetrating every conscience present. Mercer's face turned crimson now, a flush of embarrassment mingled dangerously with raw anger, his jaw clenched so tightly that the muscles visibly pulsed beneath his aging skin. He had no clever comeback this time, no smug retort to diminish the force of her accusations. The prosecutor, Graves, sank quietly back into his seat, defeated and embarrassed, fumbling awkwardly with his meaningless notes, his arrogance entirely evaporated. The gallery sat frozen, shocked into silence. The palpable tension stretched to breaking point. Yet Maya Jennings stood unbroken, her posture powerful and dignified, her eyes blazing with righteous fury, tempered by steely resolve. She had dismantled their prejudices, exposed their hypocrisy, and laid bare the ugly heart of their so-called justice. Every bruise she bore on her wrists, every mocking laugh, every dismissive glance, she returned now with unflinching strength and unwavering dignity. For a long, suspended moment, nobody spoke. Nobody could. Maya allowed the silence to remain, letting the weight of her words settle deeply into every consciousness present. She stood unmoving, a living symbol of truth, confronting the ugly face of injustice. Finally, she spoke again, this time softer, yet no less powerful. You wanted to know who I am, Your Honor? I am someone who will no longer allow this kind of injustice to pass unnoticed. You arrested the wrong woman today, not because of my badge, but because you presumed to judge me before you ever knew me. Her gaze remained steady, defiant yet calm, as she slowly lowered herself back into her chair, her expression unyielding and confident. The courtroom remained paralyzed, suspended in stunned silence, each heartbeat a deafening reminder of the truth they'd all tried so desperately to ignore. In the end, Maya had delivered a powerful, undeniable message, one that would echo long after the courtroom emptied, long after Mercer's arrogant laughter faded away. Truth would always rise, stronger than ignorance, stronger than prejudice. And today, Maya Jennings was that truth. The silence in the courtroom stretched on painfully, each passing second heavy and oppressive. Judge Ronald Mercer sat frozen on his elevated bench, his jaw working silently, his lips moving without producing coherent words. The room's sudden shift had knocked him off balance, and his previous arrogant authority had been completely drained away. His face, usually a mask of cold, commanding superiority, was now flushed red, his eyes darting frantically between the badge Maya Jennings had presented and the stark, unmistakable seal on the official DOJ complaint. Mercer's throat bobbed nervously as he swallowed hard. Struggling to find words that wouldn't betray his panic, he cleared his throat loudly, breaking the silence in a hoarse, awkward sound that echoed uncomfortably throughout the courtroom. Miss Jennings, he stammered, voice trembling slightly, desperately trying to reestablish control. This is highly irregular. You should have disclosed this earlier. But Maya's sharp voice sliced through his stumbling attempt to shift blame, her tone fierce and resolute. Her words were delivered with laser-like precision, each syllable heavy with accusation, each sentence an indictment of its own. No, Your Honor, Maya retorted sharply, eyes blazing with quiet intensity. I did attempt to explain who I was, but no one wanted to listen. Your officers didn't let me speak. You yourself refused to hear a single word of explanation before passing your judgment. You chose mockery over justice, laughter over fairness, prejudice over truth. Mercer visibly recoiled from her words, attempting to interrupt with a feeble wave of his hand. Miss Jennings, I assure you. No, you assure me nothing, Maya interjected firmly, stepping forward now, every eye glued to her commanding presence. Her voice rose, clear and penetrating, as her eyes bore into the judge with fierce conviction. You judged me the moment I walked through those doors. You saw the color of my skin, and that was enough evidence for you. You had already decided I was guilty. Before you heard a single fact, before reviewing even one piece of evidence, you'd labeled me a criminal. Maya's words reverberated throughout the courtroom, striking at the very heart of the injustice everyone had silently witnessed but chosen to ignore. Mercer shrank back in his chair, his gavel slipping nervously from his grasp and clattering against the polished surface of his bench. The sound startled him, deepening his humiliation as he scrambled clumsily to retrieve it. Maya didn't relent. Taking another deliberate step forward, her gaze locked onto Mercer's trembling form, mercilessly exposing his bias to everyone present. Tell me, Your Honor, did you even pause for one moment to consider why a professional woman with no criminal record would suddenly break federal laws? Did it ever occur to you to question the officer's narrative, to verify their claims? to hear my side of the story?" Mercer opened his mouth again, but no words came out. His authority had utterly dissolved, his confidence shattered, replaced by panic-stricken embarrassment. The entire courtroom watched in stunned silence as the judge, who moments ago had mocked and demeaned Maya, now struggled pitifully to form a single coherent sentence. Maya's voice softened slightly, yet remained dangerously calm, cutting deeper with each carefully chosen word. "You accuse me of arrogance, yet you sit there, presiding over a system so deeply flawed that the truth itself seems irrelevant to you. You mocked my claim of racism because admitting it might mean confronting your own bias. But the truth remains undeniable. You judge me purely because of how I look, without bothering to confirm who I am." She paused briefly, allowing her words to penetrate deeply, her gaze sweeping slowly across the jury and gallery, forcing them all to reflect on their own complicity in what had occurred. Faces shifted uncomfortably. Jurors stared shamefully down at their hands, unable to meet her penetrating eyes. Even the prosecutor, Todd Graves, remained frozen, his expression twisted in embarrassment, suddenly aware of the irreversible damage his silence had caused. Maya turned her gaze back to Mercer, who now looked thoroughly defeated, shrinking under her relentless scrutiny. Justice demands impartiality, fairness, and truth. Yet today, under your supervision, justice was distorted, ignored, and betrayed. The bruises on my wrists, these aren't just physical injuries. They're symbols of a system that abuses its power, a system that considers people like me disposable, unworthy of dignity or respect. Her voice dropped slightly, trembling now with the weight of emotion she could no longer fully contain, though she remained defiantly composed. "You humiliated me, publicly accused me, and presumed guilt before giving me any chance at defense, simply because you could. But now the truth confronts you directly, undeniable and clear, and you have nowhere left to hide." Mercer tried once more, desperately attempting to salvage his crumbling dignity. "Miss Jennings," he managed weakly, "the court had no knowledge," but Maya's fierce voice silenced him instantly. "You had no knowledge because you chose ignorance. You had no facts because you preferred assumption. Your ignorance is not innocence, Your Honor. It's complicity." Her words hung heavily in the air, powerful and resonant, challenging the conscience of everyone present. Mercer finally slumped back into his chair, speechless, utterly defeated, his pale, stricken face now the portrait of complete humiliation. His authority shattered, his arrogance dismantled by Maya's unyielding confrontation. The courtroom remained deathly silent, the tension so intense it felt almost unbearable. Maya stood unshaken, proud and dignified despite every injustice heaped upon her, her quiet strength radiating powerfully. She had transformed from accused to accuser, from victim to avenger, not through violence or anger, but through truth itself, wielded fearlessly in the face of cruelty. Mercer could only sit helplessly, unable to respond, crushed under the weight of the undeniable accusations. Maya Jennings had laid bare the ugly reality of prejudice hiding behind his judicial robe, exposing it to everyone present. There was no denying it now, no mocking laughter left to shield Mercer from accountability. Maya's eyes finally softened, compassion mingling with determination as she spoke her final words in that electrifying moment, quiet yet devastating in their impact. "Today you learned that justice isn't blind. People like you simply choose not to see. But I promise, Judge Mercer, you and everyone here will see clearly now, and you will remember." As her words faded, Maya stood resolutely, unyielding in the silence that followed. She had made her stand, spoken her truth, and forced them all, judge, jury, spectators, to finally confront their complicity in the injustice they had witnessed. Her courage had revealed not only the flaws within the system, but had also challenged them to question their own prejudices and choices. In the end, Maya Jennings had not merely defended herself. She had delivered justice. In the suffocating silence of the courtroom, Prosecutor Todd Graves slowly rose from his seat, clearly shaken, his confidence demolished by the crushing weight of Maya Jennings' revelations. His once authoritative voice now emerged hesitant, awkwardly conciliatory, as if hoping mere words could undo the damage already done. Your Honor, Graves began cautiously, his voice barely above a whisper, given the unexpected evidence presented today, the prosecution formally requests that all charges against Special Agent Maya Jennings be dismissed immediately. He offered Maya an apologetic glance, clearly hoping his simple request would appease her, that it would silence the outrage simmering palpably beneath her carefully maintained composure. Graves appeared desperate to escape further humiliation, ready to bury the entire case beneath procedural jargon and hastily scribbled signatures. Judge Mercer, visibly relieved, nodded eagerly, reaching quickly for his gavel, ready to strike it down, to erase this disastrous embarrassment as swiftly as possible. But before the hammer could connect, before he could conveniently sweep away the injustice that had filled every agonizing moment inside that courtroom, Maya's voice surged forward once more, ringing sharply through the stunned silence like a bullet fired into still water. No! Her single fierce word stopped Mercer's hand midair, freezing every movement in the room. The judge stared, wide-eyed, startled by her defiant interruption. Maya stepped forward, each deliberate step echoing with raw intensity against the polished courtroom floor. Her eyes blazed with a controlled fury that pinned Mercer and Graves in place, daring them to attempt escape from the consequences of their actions. Her voice shook slightly, not from fear or weakness, but from sheer rage at the casual injustice she had been expected to silently endure. You think dismissing these charges is enough? Maya demanded, voice sharp as a blade, slicing through any remnants of false courtesy. You think an apology, a quick dismissal, erases the humiliation I've endured here today? You think it cancels out the racial profiling, the unlawful arrest, the bruises left by your officer's handcuffs? Graves sank slowly back into his chair, color draining rapidly from his face as he realized his attempt at placation had catastrophically failed. Mercer's hand trembled slightly, the gavel forgotten now, his mouth moving silently, unable to produce words. Maya's gaze swept across the courtroom, searing each spectator with an intense stare that exposed their shared guilt. The silent complicity that allowed such blatant injustice to flourish. She would not allow them the comfort of escaping accountability so easily. I don't need forgiveness from you, she declared fiercely, her voice echoing powerfully off the walls, ringing clearly in every guilty conscience present. I don't need your empty dismissal, your convenient excuses, or your cowardly avoidance of responsibility. What I need, what every victim of this system needs, is justice. The fight for justice is just beginning. More shocking twists are ahead. Don't miss a moment. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications to stay with us. Thank you for standing for truth and justice. Where are you watching from? Let us know. Maya turned slowly, deliberately, letting her gaze sweep across the packed courtroom like a spotlight exposing every hidden shame. Her eyes, blazing with righteous fury, met each person's stare directly, forcing them to confront the truth they'd ignored so comfortably. Silence settled heavily, stifling, as if the room itself held its breath, afraid of what she might reveal next. You all sat here, she began, her voice low but fierce, trembling slightly with the intensity of her controlled anger, watching silently as I was dragged into this courtroom like a common criminal. You watched as they humiliated me, mocked me openly, laughed at me simply because of who I am. She paused, allowing her accusation to linger painfully, uncomfortably in the air, every listener frozen beneath the weight of their complicity. The jurors shifted uneasily, glancing downward in shame. The spectators avoided her penetrating gaze, aware of their role in the injustice that unfolded before them. Even Judge Mercer remained silent, his earlier bravado stripped away, replaced by profound discomfort. Not one of you spoke up, Maya continued bitterly, voice sharper now, each word striking the silence like a hammer against steel. Not one person questioned the accusations, the brutality, the humiliation inflicted upon me. Because it didn't surprise you, did it? It didn't disturb you enough to intervene. Because you've seen it all before. You've grown comfortable with injustice. You've become accustomed to watching people like me treated this way, so accustomed you no longer recognize how deeply wrong it truly is. The courtroom remained deathly silent, each breath a guilty whisper. Maya moved slowly, deliberately, stepping forward into the very heart of that collective shame. Her presence felt immense, powerful, a living indictment of the broken system they had passively upheld. "Do you think I'm the first?" she challenged fiercely, eyes glistening with emotion, but refusing to shed tears. Her voice grew louder, echoing off the walls, each word a passionate cry demanding recognition. "How many others stood here before me, humiliated, falsely accused, silenced by prejudice, while you simply looked away? How many others suffered quietly beneath your indifferent gaze because you didn't have the courage to confront injustice when it stared you in the face?" Her voice cracked slightly, but she steadied herself immediately, unwilling to let her anger waver, her strength falter. Maya's fists clenched tightly at her sides, the bruises on her wrists throbbing painfully, reminding her vividly of the physical manifestation of the injustice she had endured. "Every person who sat here silently today," she declared firmly, eyes blazing fiercely, "every single one of you shares responsibility for what happened in this courtroom. Your silence enables cruelty. Your indifference empowers prejudice. Your inaction makes injustice routine." Mercer shifted uneasily on his seat, attempting weakly to interject. "Miss Jennings," but Maya silenced him with a swift, sharp motion of her hand, her voice cutting across his feeble protest with absolute authority. "You've had your say, Judge. Now you will listen." Mercer fell silent again, visibly shrinking back into his seat, powerless against her unwavering resolve. "I stand here today," Maya continued, voice slightly softer but filled with steely determination, "not merely as one woman demanding justice for herself, but as a voice for countless others whose cries have gone unanswered, whose dignity has been trampled by your comfortable silence. I will not allow myself to be just another forgotten victim, another story buried beneath bureaucracy and prejudice." She took another determined step forward, shoulders squared, head held high, an image of dignity and defiance. Her eyes shone with fiery resolve, challenging every person present to confront their complicity, their cowardice. "I am not the first to endure this humiliation," she repeated firmly, her voice resonating powerfully through every heart present. "But mark my words, I will fight to ensure I am the last. Your silence ends today. Your complicity ends here. Justice must be served, not just for me, but for everyone you chose to ignore before me." She paused, allowing her words to settle into their consciousness, heavy and inescapable, a demand impossible to ignore. Because if not now, then when? The thick, stifling tension that hung over the courtroom suddenly shattered as the heavy wooden doors swung open with such force they crashed against the walls, sending echoes reverberating sharply through the shocked silence. Heads turned swiftly, the spectators jolting upright, startled eyes searching for the source of this abrupt disruption. The bailiffs instinctively stepped forward, hands darting to their belts, uncertain if they needed to act. Even Maya Jennings, standing resolute and composed in the storm's eye, shifted her gaze toward the doorway, sensing a new and unexpected twist had just arrived. A tall, authoritative figure strode purposefully into the courtroom, his polished shoes striking sharply against the marble floor, each decisive step echoing ominously. He wore a crisply tailored charcoal gray suit, bearing the unmistakable air of federal authority. In his right hand, he clutched a large official-looking envelope bearing the unmistakable seal of the United States Department of Justice. His steely eyes, fixed directly forward, betrayed no hesitation, no doubt, only an ironclad sense of purpose. Judge Ronald Mercer, already shaken, suddenly appeared even paler, his hands trembling visibly atop his polished wooden bench. The arrogant veneer of his authority, already fractured by Maya's revelations, now shattered completely. The previously arrogant judge, who had gleefully mocked and humiliated Maya moments before, now seemed diminished, a shadow of his earlier intimidating presence. The special envoy halted directly in front of Mercer's bench, raising his voice clearly and powerfully, addressing Mercer with unwavering authority. "Judge Ronald Mercer," he declared sharply, his voice resonating clearly through the stunned courtroom, I am Special Investigator Nathaniel Blake, appointed by the U.S. Department of Justice Office of Professional Responsibility. Mercer swallowed hard, panic flickering wildly across his eyes. What? What's the meaning of this? He stammered weakly, voice cracking in a desperate bid to reclaim authority, though his hands continued trembling uncontrollably. Investigator Blake didn't blink, didn't hesitate. Instead, he held the official document aloft, allowing everyone to clearly see the stark DOJ insignia emblazoned boldly across its surface. By direct order from the Department of Justice, he continued in an unwavering, commanding voice, you are hereby placed under immediate investigation for severe judicial misconduct, abuse of power, systemic racial discrimination, and violations of ethical standards governing your judicial conduct. The room erupted into stunned whispers, shocked murmurs rippling swiftly through the gallery. Jurors glanced anxiously at each other, mouths agape. Even Todd Graves, the previously confident prosecutor, now shrank back into his seat, distancing himself desperately from Mercer's crumbling authority. No, this is impossible, Mercer protested frantically, shaking his head in denial, his desperate eyes darting wildly around the courtroom, searching fruitlessly for allies. But his gaze was met only with cold indifference. Faces quickly turned away from him, unwilling to share in his disgrace. Investigator Blake stepped closer still, holding the envelope out firmly toward Mercer, unyielding, relentless in his official duty. This investigation, he declared firmly, voice ringing with an unmistakable note of justice finally served, follows credible and detailed evidence provided by Special Agent Maya Jennings, evidence that clearly establishes your direct role in enabling and perpetuating discriminatory practices and unlawful abuses of authority within this courtroom. Mercer's breath quickened noticeably, his eyes widening in horror. The document, still held out by Investigator Blake, hovered in the space between them, an inescapable symbol of the justice Mercer had long evaded. Slowly, his trembling hand reached forward, accepting the envelope reluctantly, fingers shaking violently. You cannot do this, Mercer muttered desperately, his voice barely audible. I have served this court for decades. Blake interrupted him with brutal efficiency. Your decades of service do not excuse your abuse of power or blatant prejudice. Justice demands accountability, Judge Mercer, not protection for those who betray its trust. Mercer's head snapped upward, eyes frantic with fear and anger, voice rising desperately. This woman, he gestured wildly at Maya, has twisted the truth. She's manipulated you all. Maya's voice, calm yet cutting, swiftly silenced his outburst. I manipulated nothing, Your Honor. I exposed the truth you believed you could hide beneath arrogance and intimidation. Justice is blind, but it is not ignorant. It sees you clearly. Mercer slumped back into his seat, utterly defeated, his bravado evaporating under the relentless weight of truth. Investigator Blake nodded firmly toward Maya, a quiet acknowledgement of her courage, before turning back to Mercer, his voice unyielding. Effective immediately, you are suspended from judicial duties, pending a full and thorough investigation. Officers, he commanded sharply, signaling 2 federal agents waiting just inside the doorway. Escort Judge Mercer from this courtroom immediately. Mercer sprang to his feet desperately, eyes wild with panic, voice strained with disbelief. You can't remove me like this. I demand representation. Blake responded evenly, unperturbed. You'll receive full representation according to the law. Rights you systematically denied those who stood before you, like Special Agent Jennings. Your position offers no immunity from justice. The agents moved swiftly forward, gripping Mercer firmly by his trembling arms, guiding him carefully but forcefully away from his towering bench, the seat of power he had so flagrantly abused. Mercer struggled weakly, shouting futilely, his voice trailing away as they guided him toward the courtroom's exit. The spectators, now silent, watched wide-eyed, witnessing the fall of a man who had seemed untouchable mere moments before. As Mercer's protests faded, Investigator Blake turned toward Maya once more, his expression composed yet respectful, voice steady and sincere. Agent Jennings, he addressed her directly, clearly audible to every ear present. The Department of Justice formally extends its deepest apology for the unlawful treatment you endured. Your bravery in confronting this injustice has uncovered systemic corruption, and we assure you, we will hold those responsible fully accountable. Maya stood silently for a moment, processing the gravity of what had just transpired, her heart still pounding from the adrenaline of confronting Mercer's prejudice head-on. Her voice, when she finally spoke, emerged quietly but powerfully determined. "I accept the apology," she replied calmly, nodding respectfully toward Investigator Blake. "But apologies alone aren't enough. Real justice requires change. It demands accountability, transparency, and relentless vigilance against abuses like the one this courtroom witnessed today." Investigator Blake nodded solemnly, acknowledging the undeniable truth of her words. "Agreed," he affirmed resolutely, "and the actions taken here today are just the beginning. This investigation will send a clear message nationwide. No judge, no courtroom, no institution stands above justice." Maya glanced around the courtroom one final time, observing the shaken faces, the humbled posture of Todd Graves, the empty, abandoned judge's bench now stripped of its unjust authority. She saw clearly in each set of eyes a new understanding, a painful awareness of complicity, a recognition of injustice long overlooked. "Then let that message be clear," she declared firmly, her voice strong, unwavering, filled with the quiet power of hard-earned victory. "Let no judge believe himself above the law. Let no person suffer silently again in the shadow of prejudice. Today we've shown justice isn't just a promise, it's a duty. And from this moment forward, none of us can claim ignorance. Justice will demand that we all stand up, speak out, and hold those in power accountable." Maya Jennings took a steadying breath as she stepped out from the heavy oak doors of the courthouse, the brilliant sunlight immediately piercing through the oppressive shadows that had clung so relentlessly to her throughout the trial. She blinked against the sudden brightness, the warm rays caressing her skin like an embrace of long-awaited freedom. Yet, even as she emerged into daylight, she felt the lingering echoes of injustice. The bruises on her wrists still burned beneath the crisp fabric of her navy suit, and the harsh, mocking laughter of Judge Mercer still reverberated faintly in her ears. But now Maya stood tall, her posture unyielding, her presence radiating a quiet yet fierce dignity. As she descended the courthouse steps, her polished heels clicking rhythmically on the stone surface, the silent awe of those gathered outside shifted quickly into a crescendo of excited murmurs. Cameras flashed, shutters clicked furiously, and reporters surged forward, their microphones thrust eagerly towards her. Journalists shouted questions over each other, voices mixing chaotically as they sought a reaction, a quote, an exclusive snippet of her extraordinary story. "Maya, Agent Jennings!" one journalist shouted urgently, pushing her way through the throng, eyes bright with intensity. "How does it feel to have your charges dismissed?" Another reporter jumped forward, almost stumbling in her enthusiasm. "Were you surprised by Judge Mercer's behavior? Did you expect such blatant discrimination?" A third voice broke through sharply, demanding attention above the rest. "Do you think your case signals a broader issue of racism within the justice system?" Maya paused at the base of the courthouse steps, the weight of every question settling around her like the press of an ocean wave, powerful, overwhelming, impossible to ignore. Yet instead of shrinking beneath the intensity, she raised her hand calmly, silencing the frenzied crowd instantly with the sheer quiet authority of her gesture. Her gaze swept deliberately across the faces surrounding her, reading the mix of curiosity, admiration, confusion, and in some cases, lingering skepticism. When Maya finally spoke, her voice was clear and powerful, resonating deeply and unmistakably sincere. "How do I feel?" she echoed thoughtfully, allowing the words to hang deliberately in the silence, heavy with significance. "I feel relieved, yes, but this isn't simply about me or my personal vindication. This moment is about justice itself, justice that should never have been denied or delayed. What happened to me in that courtroom was not an isolated incident. It was a symptom, a painful, undeniable reflection of a system that has tolerated prejudice for far too long." Her voice grew stronger with every sentence. words ringing passionately into the afternoon air, each syllable a fierce, determined strike against the complacency of ignorance. Judge Mercer laughed at me today. He mocked me, ridiculed me openly, not because of anything I'd done, but because of assumptions he had already made. He laughed simply because he thought he knew me. But he didn't. She paused, eyes flashing with a fierce intensity that sent a shiver through the assembled crowd. Never laugh at someone you know nothing about, Maya declared firmly, her voice echoing powerfully, resonating far beyond the immediate circle of reporters. Because that laughter, your ridicule, your contempt, may be silencing a voice you desperately need to hear, a truth that might just change your understanding of the world. She moved her gaze slowly, deliberately across the faces of the reporters and cameras, ensuring her words penetrated deeply, settling uncomfortably within their consciousness. Today, I stood in a courtroom, accused of crimes I did not commit, treated like a criminal simply because I dared to exist as a black woman confident in her own innocence. I was mocked, humiliated, disbelieved, not because evidence supported that treatment, but because prejudice allowed it. Her voice became quieter, yet more intensely passionate, emotion trembling just beneath the surface as she spoke. I was silenced today, or at least that's what they tried to do. They hoped their laughter would erase my dignity, that their ridicule would bury my voice. But they underestimated one critical thing. Silence is not weakness. She stepped closer to the cameras, her eyes shining brilliantly, defiantly, as the weight of her message filled every space, every breath, every heartbeat of those present. Silence is survival. Silence is strength. Silence is waiting patiently, courageously, for the moment when speaking becomes a necessity, when truth demands a voice loud enough to shatter ignorance, arrogance, and prejudice. Her gaze locked fiercely onto a camera lens directly ahead, addressing not only those gathered before her, but a nation watching beyond. "We will not be silent anymore," she declared firmly, voice swelling powerfully, each word charged with conviction. "Today marks an end, a definitive end, to tolerating injustice quietly, accepting humiliation passively, or excusing prejudice conveniently. From this moment forward, silence becomes action, action becomes change. Justice demands nothing less." The crowd around her erupted spontaneously into applause, a powerful wave of admiration, agreement, and passionate acknowledgement of her bravery, her defiance, her unwavering commitment to truth. Maya stood quietly, allowing the applause to wash over her, though her face remained solemn, deeply aware of the enormity of the battle still ahead. When the applause finally subsided, one young journalist stepped forward nervously, eyes earnest, voice trembling slightly with genuine emotion. "Special Agent Jennings, what would you say to others who might face similar injustices but don't have the same platform or authority you have?" Maya's expression softened visibly, compassion filling her eyes even as her voice remained powerfully determined. "I would tell them exactly what I needed to hear myself today," she replied gently but firmly. "You are not alone. Your struggle, your pain, your silence, it is heard, felt, and shared. Our voices joined together can no longer be ignored or silenced. Justice requires courage, and that courage exists in each of us, waiting for the right moment to emerge." She paused briefly, allowing her message to settle deeply into the consciousness of every person listening, both present and distant. To those facing injustice, discrimination, or humiliation, remember this: you are stronger than those who mock you. Your dignity cannot be taken from you unless you surrender it. And even if you must remain silent for a time, your silence is never weakness. It is the quiet preparation for a voice powerful enough to shake the very foundations of injustice. Maya straightened her posture, turning finally toward the bustling city streets, prepared now to continue forward, aware her words and actions today had ignited something far greater than herself. The cameras continued flashing, journalists still calling questions, but Maya moved confidently through the throng, leaving behind the courthouse and its shadows of prejudice and humiliation, stepping instead into the powerful, unyielding light of justice renewed. Her story had become more than a simple personal victory. It was now a call to action, a declaration of resilience, a symbol of hope for every individual silenced by prejudice and injustice. Maya Jennings was no longer merely a survivor of discrimination. She had become a living emblem of courage, defiance, and relentless pursuit of truth. As she stepped toward her car, one final journalist called out loudly, passionately, voice trembling with genuine admiration and respect. "Maya, Special Agent Jennings, what do you hope people remember from your experience today?" She paused, turning back one final time, her eyes fierce yet compassionate, her voice steady, powerful, and resolutely clear. "Remember this," she replied firmly, each word resonating deeply within every listener's heart. "Never underestimate the strength hidden within silence. Never ignore injustice simply because it doesn't affect you directly, and never laugh at someone whose truth you have not yet heard. Justice may be delayed, obstructed, even denied temporarily, but it will always, always rise. And today, we have proven exactly that." With those powerful final words lingering strongly in the air, Maya turned decisively away, stepping forward into the brilliant sunlight, prepared for the battles ahead, confident in her strength, her voice, and the unshakable truth she now carried. Behind her, the courthouse stood silently, forever changed by her courage and resilience, a solemn witness to the power of truth bravely spoken and justice finally served. Thank you for watching until this moment and for standing with us on this journey for justice. Your support means everything. Like, subscribe, and turn on notifications so you never miss what's next. And we'd love to hear your thoughts. Leave a comment below and let us know what moved you most in this story. Together, our voices make a difference. Maya Jennings' journey was far more than a gripping courtroom drama. It was a profound testament to the painful reality of prejudice and the enduring strength of truth. Her story was not merely about one woman's fight for personal justice. It illuminated a chillingly familiar darkness within society itself. The bruises etched deeply around her wrists were symbolic wounds, reminders of how quickly dignity could be stripped away by ignorance masked as authority. Each dismissive glare from Judge Mercer, each mocking chuckle from Prosecutor Graves, each cold glance from the indifferent spectators echoed the disturbing ease with which injustice flourishes when good people choose silence over courage. Yet beneath the courtroom's oppressive silence, Maya's quiet resolve radiated powerfully, illuminating the stark contrast between truth and deception, courage and cowardice. Every time Mercer's laughter reverberated through that courtroom, it mocked not just Maya, but the very concept of equality and fairness. Mercer's disdainful smirk and arrogant proclamations had embodied society's ugliest assumptions, that dignity, respect, and innocence could be judged at a glance, determined solely by skin color or appearance. Mercer presumed Maya's guilt not because he knew her actions, but because he had already decided who she was before ever hearing her voice. Maya's defiance, therefore, became more than personal. It transformed into a compelling symbol for countless individuals who'd faced humiliation, discrimination, and ridicule under the facade of justice. Her struggle within that suffocating courtroom exposed not only the prejudices of a single judge, but the systemic failure of a justice system built on dangerous assumptions and deep-rooted biases. As Maya stood confidently before Mercer, refusing to crumble under his ridicule, she embodied an urgent lesson: that courage could exist quietly, resolutely, even within the harshest storms of injustice. But her story taught an even deeper truth: that silence itself, so often mistaken for weakness, could become a source of immense power. Maya had waited, composed and patient, enduring ridicule and contempt, because she understood the strategic necessity of waiting for precisely the right moment. Her eventual voice, clear and forceful, shattered Mercer's carefully constructed illusion of authority, revealing the hidden truth: that real strength doesn't reside in loud, arrogant proclamations, but in unwavering patience, determination, and moral clarity. The lesson in Maya's victory was profound. Never underestimate the quiet strength within those you dismiss or belittle. Mercer's laughter had sought to silence her, to humiliate her into submission, yet it failed utterly, ultimately leading to his own disgrace. Through his downfall, the story revealed a powerful human truth that ignorance, prejudice, and arrogance are self-defeating. They consume themselves from within when confronted by unwavering truth and dignity. The courtroom spectators, too, were crucial reflections of society's complicity and injustice. Their silence had not been neutral, it was enabling. By remaining passive while Maya was dragged into court, humiliated and openly mocked, they became accomplices in perpetuating systemic discrimination. Maya's accusation against them, her fierce, unwavering challenge, served as an uncomfortable yet necessary awakening, a reminder that injustice persists precisely because too many people remain silent witnesses rather than courageous advocates. Maya's story urged an urgent reckoning with the true nature of silence. Silence isn't merely the absence of speech. It is the conscious choice to withhold truth when it matters most. The spectator's silence reinforced injustice, while Maya's strategic silence ultimately amplified her voice when it mattered most. Her declaration, delivered with passionate clarity that silence is not weakness, challenged audiences to reconsider their own complicity, their own silent endorsement of prejudice and discrimination. Moreover, Maya's victory was not simply her personal redemption. It served as a beacon of hope and inspiration for those still trapped in injustice's shadow. The painful, visible marks on her wrists, the emotional scars left by humiliation, and the brutal mockery she endured all underscored a critical truth. Achieving justice is never easy or painless. It demands sacrifice, persistence, and often profound courage. Maya demonstrated that the path to justice is littered with obstacles intended to silence, intimidate, and discourage. But true courage refuses to yield, no matter how powerful the opposition. Her triumph also illuminated a vital societal lesson. Confronting prejudice and systemic injustice requires more than mere acknowledgement. It demands action, accountability, and relentless advocacy. Maya refused the prosecutor's easy offer of dismissal because she understood clearly that true justice means holding the powerful accountable, not merely sweeping injustices quietly away. Accountability, transparency, and unwavering moral courage form the foundation upon which lasting societal change is built. By refusing to quietly accept a mere apology, Maya redefined the meaning of justice itself, transforming it from a passive expectation into an active, persistent demand. Her words, "I don't need forgiveness, I need justice," crystallized an essential moral lesson. True justice involves actively confronting injustice, dismantling prejudice, and holding accountable those who perpetuate harm. Ultimately, Maya's powerful exit from that courthouse, surrounded by journalists and onlookers, signified more than her own personal vindication. It was a powerful, symbolic rebirth of justice itself. When she faced the media, her words resonated deeply. Never laugh at someone you don't understand. This simple yet powerful message encapsulated the very heart of the story, urging empathy, understanding, and the recognition of dignity in every human being. Her cautionary reminder that silence was never synonymous with weakness and that injustice can only survive when voices remain suppressed was a rallying cry. Maya made it clear that silence would no longer be the refuge of injustice. Her voice and her story served as a powerful call to action, compelling each listener to reflect deeply on their own responsibilities toward achieving a fairer society. In the end, Maya Jennings's journey taught that justice, though frequently delayed and often painfully obstructed, can never be permanently silenced. It taught that real strength often resides in quiet dignity, patient endurance, and courageous truth-telling. And it taught, above all, that injustice thrives only when good people choose silence over courage. Maya became more than just a survivor of injustice. She became an emblem of hope, resilience, and moral clarity. Her story reminded everyone that justice demands our active participation, our refusal to remain silent, and our willingness to stand courageously against prejudice wherever it appears. The courtroom that had sought to silence her voice instead amplified it, sending a clear, powerful message to society. Justice, truth, and dignity will always rise, no matter how forcefully injustice attempts to silence them.